Hey everybody, welcome back to Derek and D and J's epic quest. Derek and Justin's epic quest. I get one too. Um, how you doing tonight?
I am good, Justin. How are you doing? Good to be back talking
Yes,
to you.
it is. It is. It's crazy to think this is episode number 5, man.
Yeah, we're doing it.
And we got lots of not lots, but we at least have a little bit of people, a little bit of a following. So,
Yeah, we
thank you.
appreciate everybody. Sorry to jump in front of you.
No, go ahead, take her away.
Just yeah, it's cool to um, see people engaging, and I know Justin, you kind of handle the Instagram, and I've been handling the Twitter. And this weekend, I might have been a little bit of drunk and posting. There's a couple that I don't really remember posting on there. So if you're about some drunk tweets, then find us on Twitter at D&J Epic Q. So it's been good so far.
I feel like you're doing a much better job with the social media than I am. Uh, I'm not as interactive, which I feel like I might just hand the reins over to you as far as Instagram goes.
We'll see. It's in real life it would be definitely outside my comfort zone, but online you just interact with people, and so far everybody's been really cool and good, and there's a few people that I've interacted with quite a bit, and it's cool to do that. It's a lot of fun. I've had a good time.
And didn't you you shared with me that we got a shout out on Twitter, right?
One of our followers retweeted something or mentioned us that somebody else was looking for Malzahn something or other, and shouted out to us that we're new readers and a new perspective. So that's pretty cool to see.
That is cool. Kinda it fills you with a little bit of pride, doesn't it?
Right, and it's hard to search things online, especially since we don't want to spoil things for ourselves. And this one particular individual, I'm sorry, I don't remember your Twitter handle right now, but he is on book 3, and I'm pretty sure he's on his first read through as well. And he's been really good about posting stuff. I've been looking at it, interacting with it, but he's not spoiling anything. So it's pretty cool.
That is really cool. What do you say? Should we hit it?
Let's rock and roll.
All right, so we are covering chapter 4 from Gardens of the Moon. This podcast is centralized around kind of initial reactions. This is Derek and I's first time through this book. We are not going ahead of ourselves. We are literally doing a chapter every week. So we know nothing of what's ahead. We know all of what is up to this point. So chapter 4, kind of like the first section, the chapter opens up with Whiskey Jack, Tattersale, Quickman, and Kalam gathered around a table in Tattersale's quarters, and it appears the previous occupants had hastily stripped the place of anything valuable and portable, leaving only larger pieces of furniture behind. Fiddler is pacing around the room, and no one seems to be paying attention to this. Tattersale makes a statement that Hairlock must be insane because he's chewed holes in his own warrens and is tasting in chaos. Quick Ben replies that it's to be expected because he's up in the body of a puppet. So of course that's twisting him. Whiskey Jack interrupts and blurts in and asks Quick Ben how twisted has Hairlock become and is that normal? Or is that normal and he's supposed to be watching their backs? Kalam pipes in and says that Quick Ben has Hairlock under control and that Hairlock is working through the maze so that he can find out who the Empire wants the bridge birders dead. Quick Ben at this point realizes or explains that the danger in what Hairlock is doing would be detection, and begins to explain to Tattersale and the rest of the room's occupants that Hairlock needs to slip through the paths the unconventional way, which is explained as using the power of chaos, which is the paths that live between the warrens. Tattersale makes the point that Tayshren would find him, or at least catch wind that someone's been sniffing around, and she begins to say that it's unhealthy, and not just for Hairlock, but for everyone in the room. To which Whiskey Jack asks why. Quick Ben answers this question and points out that it weakens the Warrens and that it frays the fabric between, but this is what allows Hairlock to break into them at will and out. Tattersale shows some frustration here and claims that Tayshren is the one that they are looking for, and that she's already told them that. Quick Ben quickly cuts in and essentially rattles off about how many people are under Tayshren's belt. We don't know any of the details of his plans or who's ordered what, or is it just the High Mage himself trying to take over? The bridge burners in this room need to know for sure what is happening. At this point, Tattersale amuses the bridge burners by going along with their need to know. And if Hairlock does unravel the whole thing, then what do they intend to do? And at this point, Tattersale is, in her mind, like, oh, are you going to try to kill Tayshren? Are they counting on me for help, Tattersale for help? And then she goes to say that Tayshren, like out loud to the group, says that Tayshren likely murdered a Coronis Night Chill and her cadre and knew about their tunnel collapsing. Tattersale then makes the argument that she's not going to help them without knowing what she's getting into, and that she has the right to know the plan. Quick Ben explains to Tattersale that they don't intend to challenge Tayshren directly, but rather to cut his support and then arrange his quote-unquote fall from grace. He ends this by saying to Tattersale to leave Tayshren to himself and Kalam. At this point, Tattersale turns to Kalam and asks him if he was a claw once. He kind of returns a shoulder shrug as a response. Whiskey Jack at this point chimes in and more or less convinces Tattersale to join them, and that he's not entirely convinced of the events taking place, but he trusts Quick Ben. Tattersale makes the statement that they are leaving covertly to Darujhistan and that she wouldn't have a way of communicating with them. Her answer was given by Quick Ben, who informed her to use Hairlock to communicate with them as he, essentially, or it, the puppet, couldn't be detected. During this time, Fiddler, the sapper, rose and started pacing through the room. As the pacing continues, a long silence between the participants of the room, and everyone is kind of staring at Whiskey Jack. Whiskey Jack eventually breaks the silence by acknowledging Tattersale's right to know, and Whiskey Jack asks Quick Ben to explain about Sorry. Tattersale has a thought of sharing her knowledge of the Virgin Death card from the Deck of Dragons she unveiled during the last reading with Tayshren, but has a change of heart and keeps this to herself. Quick Ben and Kalam in tandem begin to explain that Sorry was recruited from Ikato Khan 2 years ago, and it was explained that something ugly had taken place and it was buried deep. Then the adjunct to the Empress became involved, and in her wake, claws came to silence damn near everyone. It's explained that the company ran into dogs and they left no survivors. Quick Ben caps off by saying that Adjunct Lorne is the Empress's personal mage killer, and he's put it together that if Lorne is there, then high sorcery is involved in the massacre. Tattersale has a thought of the Deck of the Dragons and the Fatid showing her high house shadows dogs and the sorcery. Tattersale asks how this relates to Sorry, To which Kalam states that they are sure Sari is working with the High House Shadow. Tattersale and Kalam have a short conversation about House Shadow. Kalam makes the statement that House Shadow was unheard of prior to the Emperor's death. He also states that whatever disagreement there is seems to be personal. Speculations of House Shadow are thrown around when Whiskey Jack suddenly stands and continues sharing with everyone his observations of Sari in the last 2 years. The last 2 years she's been with his squad. And she loves to kill. He explains that in his opinion, he's seen demon behavior to that of humans, but when he observes his wizards scared shitless of a 15-year-old girl and his assassin sleeve a knife when around her, then something more is in play. He continues to say to Tattersale that if she for a second believes Kalam and Quick Ben's suspicion, then she can leave, because from his experience, he knows when a god steps into the fray. Tattersale begins to talk about Dasim Ultra, the Emperor's first sword, who had accepted an offer from a god, Hood, to be his Knight of Death. Something happened, and then something went wrong, and Dasim renounced the title. At that point, it's stated that all the Ascendants started meddling at once, and she's explaining this. She pauses and observes Whiskey Jack, likely recalling those memories. Tattersale has an internal thought that she thinks Quick Ben and Kalam are right. At this point, Quick Ben asks if she's in, and Tattersale answers that she is in. With a sigh of relief, Whiskey Jack asks Fiddler what's on his mind. Fiddler responds that he has a bad feeling. The bridge burners explain that Fiddler was the one that saved them from the tunnels because of his bad feeling. Fiddler whirls around and says that there's something wrong and that there's a knife out there with blood on it. Whiskey Jack, as he makes his exit, mentions that Sari is hard to keep track of, and quite frequently they lose her whereabouts between missions. Everyone but Tattersale exits the room. Woo! That was a lot to surmise.
That was pretty lengthy there, buddy.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
I am not using voice to speak ever again.
I know I caught you before we started recording, and then I noticed that you just about did it a second time, but we are 150-ish pages into this book, and neither of us have called Whiskey Jack Whiskey Dick up until today.
Yeah, I'm actually quite floored that we didn't think of that sooner, knowing who we are.
Right.
I mean, right? Like Whiskey Dick.
Yeah, it never even popped into my mind until I heard you slip up a little bit.
I'm wondering if it's just because maybe we just have a little bit of respect for Whiskey Jack, and therefore, I mean, I guess I can't speak for you, but I like Whiskey Jack as a character so far.
Yeah, I do too. Or we just haven't had a slip up. Something to draw attention to it,
Yeah, that's true. Well, it's going to take me a lot to not call him Whiskey Dick from now on.
Well, what did you think of that perspective?
I know that
there's a lot happened. Well, a lot of exposition, I guess, right?
Right. Lots of conversation, lots of delving, so to speak. But I really like this section because it kind of brings everything that we've read up into a nice, like a nice knot, right? Like everything's tied off pretty nicely for a reader. It makes sense. It's kind of a nice little tie off of everything that's happened so far in Gardens of the Moon. Would you agree?
I think so, yeah.
But it also brings in this additional element of more things being explained, like the Warrens of Chaos, right? Like it's not necessarily a Warren, but rather a path between the Warrens, to which Hairlock is is moving in and out.
Yeah, the one thing that kind of keeps throwing me off with these warrens is, I mean, they definitely seem like a mode of transport, but they also seem to be like a source of the magic too. So I don't really know how to discern those from each other. Because I know we've seen things, where like they're gearing up to use their magic and, they talk about their warrens.
I think that because, and we'll talk about this a little bit later with one of the other characters, but like for example, Tattersale's Warren is Tyr, and it is the Warren of Light. I don't know if you saw that in the back or not, but it's the Warren of Light. So, and I know that I can't remember what specific character. I want to say it was Whiskey Jack or Dewjack was talking about Tattersale being the master of her Warren. So she is essentially the master of the Light Warren.
I don't know if I picked up on that, but yeah, I definitely have picked up that there's different like avenues for warrens and stuff.
I almost associate it to the Ajas in Wheel of Time. There's different like focuses, I guess you could say, but it's not like they can't do other stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Uh, did you? I mean, you caught up on Hairlock and create like Tattersale's pretty much complaining that Hairlock's being a little asshole.
Well, he is a little
like,
asshole.
Right, he's a little fucking wooden asshole. Maybe he's got whiskey dick.
He could.
Yeah, I just there was a lot of conversation in this segment here about Tayshren, right? Tattersale kind of being speculative, like, well, how do I help these bridge burners or do I just walk away? She then realizes in talking to them that there's definitely more at play here.
Yeah, it's interesting because we kind of have seen what's going on, but these characters don't have all the pieces. We're getting all the different perspectives, but slowly, and they just, obviously they have their own, just kind of like in real life.
Right, exactly. I also feel that we or you and I may be in a little bit of a different situation because we're taking the time to read these chapters a couple of times, right?
Sometimes, yeah. I only got through this one once as well.
But even if we're not rereading the chapters, we're still taking the time to like reflect on what's happening, which I would say that the average reader is probably not doing. So I feel like this segment quickly brings back the events of chapter 1, right, with the Ikito Khan massacre, the dogs, the fact that Lauren is there because she is the Empress's, personal mage killer, which so like I like how the author in the segment is using these characters to put the pieces together. And I feel, going back to kind of my point, is that you and I, we'd recognize that one because we surmised it, we talked about it, we podcasted about it. But I feel like the average reader who is just reading this will finally get some of those questions answered if in the event that they missed it. If is where I'm going with that.
Well, yeah, and even if we don't read a chapter more than once, we're usually summarizing it together, so we get eyes on it more than once.
Right, exactly. Or using the chapter when we're surmising it.
Well, anything else you want to discuss on that section, or are we ready to move on to section 2? I know there's a lot here, and I feel like we haven't talked a lot about it yet. So if there's anything you want to go for,
I
don't want to cut you short.
Oh no, you're fine. I think the end here where they're talking about the gods and they're talking about Emperor Kellenved's first sword, right? taking or accepting an offer from, the god of death, essentially. But I want to know what it is that went wrong. Like, why did Dasim here renounce his title? And then why would that event cause, the ascendants, which I still don't really have any type of clarity. Are like ascendants like lesser gods, or are they like demigods, or like what
That was kind of
exactly?
my thought. I felt like they're demigods.
So, it's stated here that they, all of them started meddling at once. So is this kind of like the book of life type scenario where we just got these like asshole gods that are like making a bunch of bets about like who can fuck over who the worst? I mean, I feel like it's a bit more layered and complicated than that, but that's kind of like the general impression I'm getting.
Yeah, they definitely are involved though in the world.
And even, sorry, right? Like we know that, or at least the characters think that sorry is some type of god.
And very well could be. It definitely. I know that was, if I remember right, that was one of your predictions, and I felt a little skeptical of that at first, but I'm coming around to it now.
But I think that again, we with that situation, I think that we were both right, because I didn't think that they were working with Cotillion and Amanus, whereas you did. But I also thought that like she was a god. So I think that we're both right in that theory.
We found that to be the case a couple times here, and I think even again that'll happen again
I
this
think
episode.
right. I think it's interesting. It's not very often where you are breaking something down, and two parties have a different perspective, and they end up both kind of being right. Usually it's one way or the other, or just completely like a fucking miss.
Yeah, out into left field somewhere.
Right?
But yeah, we
Yeah,
haven't really had that yet.
yeah. Rig is possessed by the dog. It's a hound. That's what it is. It's got to be a hound. I mean, do you remember the breath? You know, gross, delicious, right?
Delicious.
I mean, that's the only thing that I would cap off on this first section here. Lot that takes place.
Yes, totally agree. A lot does take place, and um, even even throughout this chapter, there's a few sections that are a little bit shorter, but a lot still does happen in them.
Exactly. With that being said, you want to take it away to the next section?
Sure thing, here, buddy. Section 2. So we come back to Gano's, and he wakes up, or does he? And this is kind of where we were both right again. And we'll talk about this after. But it's bright, but there's no sun, and it's hot. He tries to remember what happened, but his memory is blank. He sees a gateway that leads to somewhere, and it wasn't made out of stone, but maybe human bodies. But it kind of wiggled and moved in place. He tries to stand and immediately falls. He hears a voice and notices a male and female. They look like they're twins. They make a dick joke about admiring his sword, and he tries to sit up again, but his body doesn't respond to his commands. He asks the twins what happened to him, and they tell him that he was murdered. So he's not fully dead yet. I was of the opinion that he was done for, but here he is. So he asks why he hasn't passed through Hood's gate, or Death's gate, as Hood is the god of death. And Ganoz realizes that these twins are open, the twins of chance. They say they are meddling with his death, but he may yet pass the gates because they don't want confrontation with Hood. But they call for Hood anyways. The form appears and cycles through some forms. And reading the descriptions, I couldn't help but think that one of them was Riga, and another was Sari, and there was a few others also. But it turns out not to be Hood. It turns out to be one of his minions or ascendants, however you want to word for that. They're bartering for a soul, and eventually they trade Gano's life for another in his shadow. and he asks what that means. And they say that it means they will trade his life for somebody close to Gnos. And he doesn't want that. He would rather be the one that's dead than, I presume, living with that pain, knowing that you were brought back to life in favor of somebody else. The twins disappear, and two massive hounds show up. Gnos figures that these are what did the damage at Idko Khan. Okay, so Gnos tells the figure, "The day you die, Shadow Throne, I'll be there waiting for you on the other side of that gate with a smile. Gods can die, can't they?" Something rustles in Shadow Throne's warren, which is the warren of death, and that's the only warren that Gnos can touch. Tells him something else went through the warren, but that he's going to have to find out on his own. Gnos isn't going to help him. Gnos says that he wants to stand. The minion or ascendant tells him that if he is to stand, it's because Hood is taking him, and that it is Hood's own decision, and that if he lives, his shadow will follow him. Gnos tells him that his shadow is a busy place these days. And that is the end of the second perspective.
What? Yeah, dude. I was hoping for Gnos to not be dead. So to read this piece the very first time was it made me happy to hear that like he wasn't dying, and I would hope that the author wouldn't just be telling him he was passing through Death's Gate, and then we'd never hear from him again, right?
Right. I didn't want him to be dead either, but just I felt like he probably was going to be, just with kind of how I felt the vibes of this book were going to be.
Well, and I mean, the end of the last chapter, right? It leaves you in a cliffhanger. So you get to this chapter, and it opens up with Tattersale and all of those guys in in her apartment. So you're like, no, tell me about Gnos.
Yeah, but yes, I was very happy to see we'll get at least another chapter out of him. Who knows? He could be really done for in the next one, but we will have to read and find out and see what happens.
Read and find out. I see that you wrote about a dick joke and something about his sword. Like, is he naked?
I assume he must be naked in this I guess purgatory that he's in.
I didn't catch that. Didn't catch the
Yeah,
dick joke.
they were admiring his sword.
Gotcha.
Quote sword. And I didn't really put this together on the first read of the chapter, but when I was writing my summary for it and going back through it, well, we'll talk about it later. I feel like it might be a minor spoiler as far as who was going through the warren, but I think it makes sense at the end of this chapter. I feel like it's revealed.
Yeah, 100%. Totally see where you're going with this. Yeah, I think it's interesting because we're introduced to the twins, right? Which we know Opan from Tattersale's reading of the deck of cards, right? We know them to be essentially chance or luck, right? And we'll talk about this later, but remind me to come back to the dick joke sword at the end there if I don't get to it, because I have a theory there.
All right.
And that it's not actually about his dick. But we could talk about that when we get later towards the later segments.
Sure thing.
I loved the description of this purgatory, right? Because like I just imagine this barren landscape, right? Sun is pelting down on you. There's just this writhing gateway of bodies just kind of like moving ever so slightly, yeah, it was just super cool to envision it.
Yeah, you know what? I don't know why, but I was thinking about this like after I read the chapter. I was thinking about this like the last couple days before we before we started recording, before we even wrote our summaries for this, but I just had like Bruce Almighty vibes in my head, like Jim Carrey. like,
In
that's
what
what I was.
way?
Just like he's in this like big empty space, and like God is there. Morgan Freeman shows up.
Opens a file drawer that pushes you all the way across a room.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just what was like. That was kind of like the vision I had in my head of the scene. Almost was just like Jim Carrey, Morgan Freeman.
So kind of like cartoons when they depict purgatory or some type of like breaking the fourth wall thing where they're just like floating in this white vastness of the show and they're talking to you as the viewer, maybe.
Yeah, just this big, great, wide open, this big nothing, and just kind of being in awe and amazed, and just trying to deal with it all. I don't remember a ton from that movie, but yeah, just remember him kind of waking up in nothing, and that's Gano's kind of made me think of that. For
Gotcha.
whatever reason. That was the vision I drew.
I like it. It's a good vision. Did you Hood's assistant here? I have a theory that he's the Mason of Death. Like this is the guy who builds barrows.
Oh yeah, did they? We talked about that a little bit later here, I think, right?
Right. So it'll kind of bring into the next sections, but I don't really think it's like that much of a spoiler. I just think that it's, you mentioned in the summary and in the segment that Hood isn't like Hood is called, but Hood does not come, but rather it is a minion
Yeah,
of Hood, but the description is pretty similar to that of, later on. So I'm just curious if they're the same.
yeah, that makes sense. I think you're right.
I didn't catch the cycles of forms though. I'm glad that you're bringing that up because what makes you think what what was described that made you think it was Riga/Sari?
Let me see if I can find it here in the book because he described like an old woman and then a
Young woman,
like
right?
a young girl, and then I can't remember what the other forms were, but
Gotcha.
So all right. Paran rolled his head, watched as a bent, limping figure emerged from the gate. Wearing rags, the figure slowly approached Paran. An old woman, a child with a drool on his chin, a deformed young girl, a stunted, broken Trill, a desiccated Tisty Andy. So maybe I guess one of those doesn't really sound like Sorry. Sorry wasn't a child with a drool. I don't think she's ever described as deformed, but just the old woman. I don't, for whatever reason, I just felt like that must be Riga.
I mean, at this point, she's the only character that we know that is kind of like an old hag. So I could get where you're going there. I could totally see that as Riga. I just don't remember that description. I remember him like changing forms, but I didn't catch the specifics of those forms.
And maybe they meant nothing, but that was just. I feel like in a book, nothing. There's always a clue in something.
Exactly.
Every line. So I don't know that I would say it's a callback, but maybe kind of.
I also want to know why the twins, right? Like they seem just as far as like the things that we've been introduced in the deck of dragons, they seem like a small opponent,
Yeah, but they must have some sort of. I don't want to say payoff, but I mean it just seems like they're up to mischief. I mean, the way they're described on the card, it sounds like a Joker, right? And Jokers are usually trouble.
Like a fool. Yeah. I guess maybe, they just got like a Loki vibe, Loki, like the god of mischief kind of thing.
Yeah,
So
I can see that.
maybe they're just in there to just fuck some shit up, but
Cause a little
yeah.
chaos.
Yeah. But why Gnos? I mean, there's so many things that have yet to be revealed. But at the same time are coming to a nice head, right? Like a lot of questions are being answered. We know at this point that gods have something to do with this and are either very active in the Malazan Empire or not so much, you know?
Yeah, he must. He's going to be a player here, I think. So
Yeah, I think so too.
let's see what
And
he
we'll
brings.
talk about that more uh, in these future sections. But I guess, yeah, I thought it was a really cool little section. I'm glad that Gnos is at least not dead in this section.
Not yet.
Not yet.
I think he'll probably be around for a little bit.
I think so too. And with that, we should continue on with section 3.
Take it away there, buddy.
Will do. So, as the voice of the god faded away, Paran entered a state of recalling memories he thought were long lost. During the state of recalling memories, he feels someone reshaping these memories to their will. This gave Paran a moment of terror as he couldn't fathom why this was happening. He then sees a face getting closer to him, and he recognizes this face as Picker's. Paran seems to be transitioning from the place he was previously as he's questioning if the events that took place previously had ever happened. The scorching heat, the archway of moving bodies. So during this kind of realization or doubt of where he is or where he was to where he currently is, Picker is analyzing the wounds that Paran took, and Paran can feel these quote unquote soft touches, and slowly the pain of his wounds resurface, and he lets out this huge big scream, to which Picker is shocked and surprised by this and yells for Mallet, the healer. No, I think it's Fiddler. Is Fiddler? No, Mallet's the healer. Because
Mallet's the healer. Yeah.
yeah, because
Well,
Paran
I don't.
Gnos was alive. What were you gonna say? Sorry, dude.
Well, I don't think that Mallet's necessarily just a healer, but he's some sort of mage because they talk about him being able to affect the weather too. Here a little bit later in this chapter.
Oh yeah.
And I don't remember if it was in the section I just summarized or if it was in this one, but I feel like I remember something about as Gnos is coming to, obviously his wounds should have been fatal, but I thought I remember reading how some of his wounds were partially healed already. I don't know if any of that's ringing a bell to you.
It definitely is, and it's something we'll cover on in a little bit lengthier detail in the next couple of sections.
All right.
But yeah, you're 100% right. Which will kind of unravel some of these previous sections a little bit more, kind of hopefully maybe make a little bit more sense as to what happened.
Yeah, this section's pretty straightforward. He's just, gaining his consciousness back and probably in a fuckload of pain.
Yeah. I thought it was really cool how the author transitioned here, and I didn't do it justice at all by the way that I summarized that. But I just thought it was cool how you as the reader are reading about his memory, and the author tells the story of Paran and his two younger sisters running on cold feet with his sister's hands in his, running for their like parents' bedroom not only to find them, but like the eldest housekeeper already there. So it's just kind of like you see some of these memories being twisted, and then he kind of makes this speculation that like, oh, or this not speculation, but maybe feeling that like somebody is meddling with my memories. So I just thought that was cool how you go from very descriptive memories to it transitioning to Picker's face.
To the waking world.
Right.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Like, I don't know if there was really a part of this chapter that I didn't enjoy. This is one of the shorter parts, but it could have easily skipped over him, coming back too. But we get a little something showing him coming back to the land of the living.
Yeah, 100%. And I feel like the author usually in every section is leaving like a little bit of like a cookie crumb trail to follow. Like I think that there's definitely some importance to this, which will play out later. Something that I don't think we've unraveled yet, or maybe not unraveled yet, but we have, very, very, what's the word I'm looking for? Small theory on, something is taking place. A very little understanding.
Yes.
So far, this is probably my favorite chapter. Like I was pretty geared when I read the end of it, So
I see what you did there.
Cool. Well, you want to gear up and read the next section?
Sure. Cue up your Matchbox 20 music because it's 3 a.m. Two guards standing watch, and one of them comments that it's a shitty night out because it's raining. The other one says, "Yeah, no shit, genius," and smacks him with his pike. We get someone approaching these two guardsmen, and it's Kalam, and they want to know what he's up to. And Kalam says, "Whatever I'm doing, it's best that Tayshren does not know about it." So they drop Tayshren. Kalam drops Tayshren's name, and then these guards realize that he's with Whiskey Jack, and that they'll do whatever Kalam needs. They're his men. So Kalam says that they're bringing a body, and they never saw it. Wink, wink. So the body gets drug on by, and they're pretty shocked at the shape of the body. It's pretty rough. Kalam tells them that if a woman shows up, to get the fuck out of the way, let her pass, just pretend you didn't see her, and tells them to stay alive. So the two Marines basically go look for some bushes to hide to, get out of Dodge and protect themselves. They were not ready to die that night. So another short section here, just kind of feel like setting things up here for a little bit later this chapter. And surprisingly, this little exchange, at least the location of it, does have some significance here a little bit later on.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. This section is not really meant to be diagnosed because it's set up for something that happens later on. I will comment that I don't really understand why they're hiding.
Well, I don't know. I guess
I know that I remember them looking for like a place to hide, but I don't know if it's necessarily like a cowardice type action, but more of a like, a surprise whoever may come up action is how I interpreted that, but like it left me a little confused. So I wasn't sure and was hoping that maybe you could shed some light, but it's a small thing. It's really not that big of a deal.
From what I remember reading, it would have been Tattersale that would have been coming back, right?
Right.
The female.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the Clem saying that she would be out for blood. And so she probably wouldn't have cared who was in the way. If somebody's going to give her some shit, she'd just cut him down, I think.
Gotcha. That makes more sense.
That was my takeaway, anyways.
Yeah, I want to know who hired these dumb shits. They seem like idiots.
Well, not everybody can be smart. That's why you got grunts and why you got officers, right?
Yeah, they probably should have just, packed more gear, right? Maybe.
You're pushing hard.
All right. Well, I guess with that, we'll go to the next section. What do you say?
You know what? You know what really grinds my gears, Justin?
What's that?
No idea yet. Nothing that you do.
Oh, okay. You were just throwing that in there.
Yep.
I see you.
Tossing my hat to the ring.
Appreciate it. So this section begins with Tattersale is sitting at a table in her quarters, feeling this imperativeness to use the deck of dragons again, and so she does. This time choosing to use a spiral pattern on the table, and towards the bottom of the spiral, the root card awaits the hound. Tattersale makes the thought that the High House Shadow has become involved, saying that it challenges Opan's command of the game. She then takes a look at the beginning of the spiral. The very first card she laid was the Mason of High House, Death. She has a chilling thought that the Builder of Barrows who is also the promise of death, not to one or to a few, but to many. Tattersale is having a hard time understanding and analyzing these patterns that are being introduced, making it seem that a new game has been thrown onto the table. But halfway through the deck, she notices High House Dark's Knight, a counterpoint between both the Hound and the Mason of High House Death. Tattersale notices that the sword depicted in the High House Dark's Knight was rising with a black smoky streak, and the sword appeared to be pointed at the Hound. She at this point realizes that High House Dark's Knight and High House Shadow will have some type of confrontation. Tattersale's heart is pounding in her chest. She thinks to herself, what the hell? Oh, whoops. There we go. Tattersale's heart is pounding in her chest as it draws on her that many people will die and that the Mason of Death will be building barrows. She thinks to herself, is he building hers? Is she building mine? Is she building Tattersale's? And as the thought of, do I abandon the bridge burners and flee from Taishren and the Empire, she has a memory that was suppressed for 2 centuries. She is taken back to her hometown, not mentioning her talent, and devastation and destruction are rained down. She is snapped back to reality, feeling guilty back then. She has the thought that she is going to run away this time. At this point, Tattersale feels magic behind her and turns to face Quick Ben stepping out of his warren. She makes the note that it has a spicy smell to it. Quick Ben says that he's called Hairlock and that the situation has just gotten more complicated. Tattersale smiles to herself and says, really? So I like this because the deck of cards is intriguing me. But I'm going to let you give your thoughts, and then I'm going to see if what I came up with is similar or maybe, yeah.
The deck of cards are interesting, but I don't, I guess what I'm confused about, she's doing these in different patterns. I don't know what that has to do with anything if you're just drawing cards off the top, right?
I think,
What if you put them in a circle or if you just lay them out one next to each other?
well, because I know when in the previous chapter with Tayshren, she kind of puts or reveals cards in like a cross or T formation, where there's a center pile of cards. There's one in front of Tayshren, to the right, left, and then in front of Tattersale. But this one I imagined as a spiral that starts on the inside and then spirals around itself, if that makes sense. I guess it's hard to describe using words, but yeah. So the beginning card,
I just don't know what the significance is.
yeah, and I'll explain what I feel is the significance. But the beginning card in the center is the Mason, is the Mason of Death, which is the barrel builder. And then as it spirals outward, the very end card is the Hound. He mentioned, or sorry, not he, Tattersale notices that in the very middle of the spiraling deck is the High House Dark's Night.
I don't remember if it was that one, but I thought one of the other ones alluded to Sorry.
That was in the previous chapter. That was the Virgin of Death. Which in the beginning of this chapter, in the beginning of this chapter in that first section, Tattersale has a thought about revealing Sorry to the bridge burners as they're like kind of trying to convince her to help them out, but she decides not to. So that might be what you're thinking of.
It must be. I remembered something about that. I guess I don't know why I thought it was in this chapter, but yeah, like the flashback to her when she was younger, when she was, I guess I wouldn't call it playing with the deck of cards, but putting the cards out, when she saw that her village or whatever, whatever she predicted or saw in the cards came true, and she didn't say anything about it. And now that's kind of happening again, and again she's kind of contemplated running and just abandoning everybody and letting things play out as they will.
I didn't even think about that perspective. I took that as she didn't utilize her talent for sorcery to like defend against whatever these unnamed invaders were. So that's super interesting that you bring that up. I didn't even think about that.
That's the gloriousness of two different people reading the same book, I suppose, huh?
That is true. Okay. Do you want to hear what I've got cooking?
Spill it. Spill the beans.
Spill it. Okay. So the High House Dark's Night. So the card is described as having a black smoky streak, and the sword appeared to be pointing at the Hound. So that means that the Hound is above High House Dark's Night, which is Paran. I really think that in the deck of dragons, the High House Dark's Night is Paran.
I think I could get on board with that.
Because again, we have, because in maybe it's revealed later on. Yes, something is revealed later on.
I think I could get on board with this just from like what we've seen previously in this chapter. Like, I think it fits. It makes sense.
Yeah, my guess is that in the deck of dragons, the Dark's Night, the High House Dark's Night is is Gano's Paran. Which now I remember, in a previous chapter, remember how Tattersale, in chapter 1, when we were initially introduced to the deck of dragons, she pulls out this card. Like, this isn't the first time we've seen High House Dark's Night. It is said that he could either be a friend or a foe.
Yep.
let's just assume that Gano's Paran is the High House Dark Knight. Like, at this point in time, we really don't know if he's friend or foe, because he's obviously with the Empire, right? But the bridge burners have some type of, I mean, they're concocting some type of plan towards Taishren, potentially towards the Empress. So is Gano's going to go along with that? Because Tattersale seems to be moving away from the Empire and towards the bridge burners, is kind of what I'm gathering from that.
Also, doesn't it say that Death's Knight and the Hound have a confrontation?
Yes, 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 but I feel like that was revealed later on in a different segment. So I didn't want to like give it away, but yes, that you're absolutely right. So
I
that
thought that was in this section.
it might have been, and maybe I just didn't write it down, but oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
It is right there. I'm a dummy. Okay, yeah, so absolutely. And that's what makes me believe that it's, Ganos Paran, clearly has came back from life to life, and we'll find out a little bit more later on. Is the one who will fight against what I would assume Cotillion and Amanus.
Guess we will have to find out on that.
Cool. Yeah. I guess you're up, buddy.
All right. We are at 4 a.m., or what I presume to be 4 a.m., because we hear 4 bells after midnight. Whiskey Jack knows Fiddler has something on his mind. Fiddler says it's a feeling about Tattersale. Whiskey Jack wants to know about Tattersale, and Fiddler says she seems scared, ready to cry at any moment, seems to have lost her backbone. He thinks that if Taishren applies any sort of pressure to her, she's going to break. But Whiskey Jack says not to underestimate her. She's a survivor and loyal, and been offered the high mage position multiple times, but has turned it down every single time. Something else has been bothering Fiddler, and he offers up the info. He says that he can feel something bad coming, and it's going to be messy. We get Dujek entering, and he asks if anybody has any information about where Gano's is. There's no new word on him, but they're looking for him. To find him, it might be helpful to know who wants him dead. He's not a claw, but he is a noble from the capital city of Uta, and not even noble families like other noble families. It could be someone in those circles. He is supposed to command the unit going forward, not just this mission to Darujhistan. And so this infiltration mission, they don't know if it's Gano's plan or if it comes from somewhere higher up, maybe even as high up as the Empress. Dujek thinks it's a shit plan. Whiskey Jack thinks it's perfect for what it's supposed to do, which is to kill everybody, which he thinks that to himself. He doesn't speak that out loud. Dujek confides that there's pressure to disband the bridge burners and merge them in with the other armies. He says that if Whiskey Jack and his squad come out alive from Darujhistan, that they have his permission to walk away and leave, and Dujek would take care of the rest of the bridge burners. We get the feeling that Whiskey Jack doesn't really want to go, because if Dujek makes another move towards the Empress, or otherwise, he doesn't want to be far away from that. He's close to Dujek, and at one point, Whiskey Jack had outranked him. And as this section closes, Whiskey Jack and Dujek both look to the sky.
I mean, I feel like this is kind of like that other section where it's kind of a setup to other events later on. But I think it's interesting the different perspectives that Dujek and Whiskey Jack have about, the assignment going forward in Darujhistan.
Yeah, the completely different views on it.
It's almost,
I guess they're similar in a sense. I mean, Dujek thinks it's a shit plan because it's a shit plan, and Whiskey Jack thinks it's a good plan, but also at the same time a shit plan because it's going to kill everybody, and that's what Dujek is afraid of.
right, because Dujek, from what I'm taking away from the section, is totally seeing through whatever bullshit, like clearly at this point, the bridge burners are being singled out. And, potentially anyone else that was around during the Emperor's rule, which has been established in previous chapters. But then to have Whiskey Jack, essentially simple, thinking the same thing, and is more just kind of like self-deprecating almost. Like, okay, cool, whatever. Like, I know what they're doing. Like, just fucking kill me and get over with it. Like, I'm tired of this bullshit. Is kind of like what I'm gathering on how he's maybe feeling at this point.
Yeah, I follow you. The other thing I thought that was interesting is that we found out that Tattersale's been offered the position for High Mage, and she's turned it down. Like, that's the first time we've heard any of that.
I'm curious as to why or how, maybe curious as to the circumstances as to why she denied it. I don't think it specifically said, did it? I don't think it did.
No, I don't think so. I guess we'll have to see if they disclose that information later.
I didn't even realize that the 4 bells thing, I know that's stupid and super small, but as you said that, I'm like, God damn it, Justin! Like, really, you missed that?
I mean, it makes sense to me. And also, I'm also wondering why these people don't sleep ever.
I mean, they just had a siege,
Go to fucking
week,
bed.
9 days ago or some shit like that.
We need Samuel L. Jackson to read his book in here.
Go to sleep. Go the fuck to sleep. Yeah, totally does. Well, I mean, yeah. Should we just continue?
I don't think there's much else to really add into that at all. Yeah, I would say let's keep moving on.
Cool. We come back to Tattersale in her quarters, and she recognizes that she is just exhausted. Maybe she should go the fuck to sleep. Quick Ben mentions that the hound has caught the trail of Hairlock. Kalam curses and starts pacing about the room. We, as readers, are informed that Quick Ben and Hairlock, the Pinocchio, are linked, and that he has been on the trail of something or someone in the Warren of Shadow. Quick Ben feels Hairlock reach the gates of Shadow and then goes beyond. He loses the link with Hairlock, and everyone has a moment of anxiety. Quick Ben senses Hairlock shifting through Warrens and state that he is coming out. Quick Ben announces that with Opan's luck, he'll lose the hounds. Quick Ben is silent as he focuses on Hairlock and the Warrens. Kalam stops pacing and directly in front of Tattersale asks her about Taishran. Tattersale says that Taishran is aware that something is happening, but unable to pinpoint what. She states that she can feel him cautiously, probing, but Tattersale makes a quip about a wolf being that which Taishran seeks. Kalam says, or hounds. Tattersale then kind of intrinsically has this thought about Hairlock. And is this what he's doing in the Warrens? Is he getting the hounds to chase him? Potentially leading Trayshan into an ambush? Tattersale kind of snaps out and then confronts Kalam on how foolish that would be, because the hounds are more ancient than the Shadow Realm itself. Kalam at this point has an admission that he spoke from fear and that he wouldn't wish the hounds to be released upon the city. The door to another room opens and Mallet approaches Tattersale, telling her that Paran should be dead, mentioning that the first wound was up under his heart, adding that it was a professional thrust. Kalam pips in and says that he should be dead. And if he isn't, then what does that mean? Tattersale simply just says intervention. Tattersale asks Mallet if his healing skills were sufficient enough to heal Paran. The healer begins to explain that he didn't have to do much because the wounds were already starting to close and the physical damage already mended. Tattersale asks, well, what he means as Kalam comes to the table after he's retrieved a jug of wine and three clay cups. Mallet begins to explain that healing should never be separated between the flesh and the sense of flesh, and begins to explain it that it's hard to explain, but the Denal Warrens involve every aspect of healing, since damage when it occurs does so on all levels, and then begins to explain that shock is the scar that bridges the gap between the body and the mind. Kalam inquires about Paran, and after taking a drink from the cup, Mallet responds with, whatever force interceded cared for nothing but healing the flesh. He may be well on his feet in a day or two, but the shock needs time to heal. Tattersale's kind of confused by this and asks Mallet if he was able to heal the scar, so to speak. Mallet responds with, essentially, how could I? He is unable to differentiate the scar from that of a lifetime of events and or trauma that Ganos Paran has experienced. After some conversation about Hedge, who is currently with Paran, Tattersale blurts out that Paran is going to be used. Mallet confirms this by revealing more of his delving, and that nothing of his healing showed any type of mercy, but rather calculation. Quick Ben kind of startles them all by breaking his silence from what he was saying previously, and tells them that the attempt on his life was from the shadow. At this point, Tattersale ponders about Sorry, and when she does return, she's going to have a lot of hard questions to answer. Tattersale is 100% positive at this point that Sorry is working with High House Shadow. Quick Ben continues on stating the fact that whoever interceded is now in direct competition with the Shadow. Quick Ben makes eye contact with Tattersale and then says that they need to know everything that Paran knows. Kalam interrupts Quick Ben and explains that we're not going to be around. Tattersale gets fucking pissed and assumes at this point that not only does she have to watch the fucking Pinocchio, but she now has to watch the Captain too. Quick Ben at this point rises, explains that Hairlock will be gone for some time, and that if he cannot lose the hounds, that he might barter with House Shadow. This statement sends a chill down Tattersale's spine, and then Kalam tells Mallet to gather Hedge as they have to leave for Darujhistan, the last free city. Tattersale fears that they will all die, and thoughts of the Mason's Barrow comes racing back into her thoughts. And yeah, that's another fucking long one. But
yeah, you got stuck with two of the big ones in this chapter.
It's all good. It's fun to me. I like to do that.
What did you think was like the most interesting part of this perspective?
I really, really enjoyed the description of the Denal Warren in this. Like, now we kind of have an understanding how Hedge, right? No, not Hedge. Mallet. How Mallet uses I guess what I would call the healing Warren. The Denal Warren is what one would conjure when seeking to heal somebody. And the fact that they didn't heal the trauma, they just healed the bodily damage.
I thought that was really interesting too. I think that was probably also my favorite part.
It's just a lot of again, things that it's like the switcheroo, like questions from previous interactions chapters are kind of like starting to level off and be answered, but then like new information is coming in at the same time, which you as the reader understand, but at the same time you're even more curious about.
Yeah, and so the other thing, I don't know if this is going to be kind of going off what you're talking about or not, but it's talking about Hairlock jumping between the warrens here. Um, this is where I figured that when we first see Ganoes in this chapter and something spooks, the God, what do we call him? I want to say a 10. No, the minion or whatever, Death's minion. Something spooks him and the Hound in a warren. That's got to be Hairlock splitting, the fabric of the warrens, going in between them, right? Like as we were summarizing these, like when we went through that was kind of the aha moment for me. I don't know if you had that feeling or not.
I mean, I think it was one of those things where I don't think that I looked at it that closely, but that makes a ton of sense because also in that chapter, Opon, or the twins, Opon, they get spooked too. And remember, they almost leave. And then I think it's the sister, like the girl, was just like, no, we're not done doing what we're gonna do.
I guess I don't remember all the specifics that went down, so I will trust you on that. But yeah, I remember things. Everybody gets kind of spooked here by something, so it's got to be Hairlock running around causing a little bit of chaos.
Well, because like at the, it's revealed that the hounds have caught the trail of Hairlock, so I think that it is either Hairlock moving through these warrens kind of unconventionally, right? Or the hounds chasing him that are either scaring the minion or startling the twins. Like, because I feel like they're startled by something, and I think that they do mention the hound.
I think so too.
But yeah, it was just I mean, if you think about the scene, right? Like, there's not really anything huge happening here. It's just Quick Ben. I kind of imagined like sitting cross-legged, right? Like how you would in elementary school. But I think it's described as him like just like levitating a little bit off the floor. And he's kind of like, in this trance, so to speak, where he's linked with Hairlock, who is just, leading this hound all over the warrens, right? And then Tattersale and Kalam are having kind of their own conversation, and then Mallet comes in and tells Tattersale and Kalam about how Ganoes is doing, and then kind of goes in to explain what it is that he discovered.
And the things are going to go to shit here pretty quick.
Oh yeah, they're definitely going to take a giant dump. So one thing that I thought was interesting is when Mallet is talking to Tattersale, he makes a comment after he tells her about the professional thrust, or as Mallet is talking about how Ganoes was killed, that first stab underneath the heart. He goes on to say that the second stab, not as lethal, but over a couple of days, the blood loss would eventually have killed him. But Mallet, after he says this, he kind of takes a look at, like, gives like Kalama like a side eye kind of a thing, which I think is funny because in the section where Paran sees Picker and screams, I know that, and I left this out because I didn't think it was like too terribly important to the summary, but Picker and Antsy are having a conversation about like, well, who could have done this, to which Picker or Antsy, I'm not sure who, said that this doesn't look like Kalam's work. So I think it's interesting how he comes up in two different like people's perspective of him in Gano's being stabbed. I mean, we know it wasn't Kalam, but it's kind of funny how the author is building up maybe some suspicion around Kalam. Like, we know he's an assassin.
Got to throw the trail off a little bit.
Right. I just thought that was cool. Just like a small, minute thing.
There's a lot of that in this book, I think.
Yeah. Which I like. I'll take it. I like that.
Definitely makes it fun to read.
Yeah, and I guess if there's anything that I learned from like the Wheel of Time is that like I wish that as I read it, I would have maybe paid. I mean, I feel like I paid attention, but I feel like I should have paid closer attention to like the smaller stuff.
It's different when you slow it down and like with what we're doing, reading it and talking about it versus just reading it and moving on to the next chapter and reading it and moving on to the next.
Well, right. Yeah. Cause I find myself, I mean, I'll get through these chapters, after a couple of days after we finish our podcast. And I'm like, well, I want to read. So I'll just go back and reread the chapter. And every time I do, I pick out more and more than I originally did. But I guess I just associated to, and this is probably going to sound lame, but I'm currently reading, Mossflower from Brian Jakes. And there was a part in the book where Martin the Warrior and then Gaunt the Mouse Thief, they're in some type of bat cave, and the bats are afraid to go up higher because there's a large bird of prey up there. And so they, of course, with their mole friend, they dig underneath the bird and the bird's nest and essentially just flush the nest down the mountain so he doesn't have anywhere to like settle. But it was mentioned that it was an owl, but in Redwall, which takes place after Mossflower, there is a owl that Matthias meets near the quarry, and the owl mentions that he used to prey on bats but no longer can. So like when I read that, I'm like, oh, it's that motherfucker. So yeah, it's just cool to like take something so small and not even story related and just tie things together. I really enjoy that stuff.
I miss Redwall.
Dude, you should pick it up for like $10. Well, $8 a book.
One of these days I'll have to.
I guess, do you have any other thoughts about this section here?
I do not. I think I would be ready to move on to the next if you are.
I'm ready.
The Black Moranth are approaching on their corals, their giant dragonfly things. Dujek asks Whiskey Jack where his squad is, to which Whiskey Jack nods to Fiddler, to which Fiddler heads for the door in the ceiling, and Whiskey Jack replies that they will be here. Fiddler disappears into the room below while the Morath riders fly. Within feet of their heads, landing behind them without any sort of extravagant ceremony. We find out that there is an alliance between the Empire and the Moranth, and that it changed the war. Changed it in the sense that it gave them air superiority. They could transport supplies, troops to just about anywhere fairly easily, and that's a huge advantage. We also discover, or I guess it's alluded to, that we don't know if the Moranth are completely human or not, because nobody's seen any of their cities, and they collect their dead on the battlefield. Whiskey Jack is concerned by this because if the Moranth were to have a thirst for power, there would be trouble for the Empire. Due to arguing voices from below, Dujek walks to Whiskey Jack's side and tells him that the squad has arrived. Telling Whiskey Jack that they're giving an earful to the new recruit, and he mentions that he doesn't want to know about it. Whiskey Jack becomes nervous, secretly hoping that Sari had decided to desert. He surmised that either his men found her or she had found them. He wonders if she had tried to kill Gnos. Here's a hint. She did. She didn't succeed, but she tried. Quickben and Kalam hold that suspicion as well, and there's a little bit more banter going on. Dujek's complaining about the weather, and we find out that mages can affect the weather. But Dujek kind of dismisses this and says it's more him getting old than it is the weather bothering him. He tells Whiskey Jack that all the supplies have been delivered or dropped off and asks if he's ready to go. Whiskey Jack is looking at Sari and notices that she has very little with her, basically just whatever she's wearing and a small backpack. He contemplates about how young she is, and a memory washes over him as he recalls the Mott's campaign. Sari had joined them from the recruits from Naphalog, and he watched her kill three people that they're hoping to get information from. As Sari started to, I guess, as we read it, and kind of decided she was dismembering them, Kalam intercedes with what Sari is doing, and Sari simply ends their misery by slitting their throats. And the part that really bothered Whiskey Jack about that was, as she was doing this, they were blessing Kalam, thanking him for what he was doing. And even though Sari had been in the squad for 2 years, they still called her a recruit. Recruits were not labeled bridge burners. And finally, everybody mounts up, and Dujek yells to get moving.
Oh, sorry. It just, everything seems so clear, but at the same time is just so clouded. You know what I mean? Like everything surrounding Sorry is like, it's explainable, it's understandable, it's acknowledged, but like it's just, there's just so much more. It just feels like it feels so much heavier.
Yeah, she just seems to, like you said, have this dark past and a dark present, and seems like a dark future too. It doesn't seem like there's much opportunity for sunshine in her life.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the hard part is like, we don't know much about Sorry, outside of what she currently does. But the very, even in the first chapter, how the book essentially opens up, we don't get a ton of how she is. She seems to be caring though, because she's trying to like get stuff to help her dad make a new net, so like, but that's really all you get. You don't get anything that like of her past, so you don't really know her as a person.
No, you do not.
But yeah, these guys are gearing up to essentially go to their next destination, which is Darujhistan, which was a set. I mean, this section was a setup from the previous section where Whiskey Jack and Dujek are having a conversation on top of the battlements, so to speak, and as that section ends, they looking towards the sky, they're essentially seeing the Black Moranth approach.
Yeah, and yeah, like you said, I mean, they're just going to be moving out. They're good, better, or worse, whatever lays ahead of them in Darujhistan. That's where they're headed next. We don't see a whole lot here other than finding out how gruesome Sari can be if she needs to be or chooses to be.
Yeah, didn't it mention in the chapter that she was going to town on their nuts or their junk?
That's what it seemed like.
Yeah.
I don't really know why that was necessary, but I didn't write this book.
Maybe she has something against men. I mean, who knows? Or she just enjoys torture before death. Whatever Riga or whatever this god is, like goddess potentially, like demented motherfucker. Like just the very little that we know about her history.
Yeah, it's It's a little brutal.
Cool. What do you say? Should we gear on?
Let her rip.
The scene sets to thunder rumbling in the sky above, as maybe the rain has diminished and pools of water on the ground are reflecting the gray sky above. Among the narrow alleyways of Pale's Corral Quarter, a dog the size of a mule lopes south along the alleyways with glowing amber eyes. The hound was ranked 7th among Shadow Throne's servants, and his name is Gear. Gear knew that it wasn't a human that he tracked, and that it was elusive and couldn't even catch a glimpse. And he couldn't even catch a glimpse of what he was chasing. The pursued had entered Shadow's realm and had peeked at Gear's lord's web. This infraction deserved death. The hound also knew that eventually he would become the hunted. As he left the warrant, he could feel nearby magic being summoned. Gear silently strolls through the city, eventually rounding a corner where the breeze whirls his head down the street. He observes an estate with 4 soldiers. He sees the open second store window and thinks to himself that the trail ends. Fuck, dude. I read this. Fuck.
Yeah, I was really surprised that we got like a perspective from a dog and that it wasn't like just some stupid animal.
Right, like it has
Like
thoughts.
And it's the 7th best one, and it seems pretty fucking smart.
That begs the question. Like my immediate thought is like, because when a mana summons the hounds, correct me if I'm wrong, but there were 7 of them, wasn't there?
I don't remember, to be honest.
Could have swore that there were 7 of them, but
There could have been.
That made me think that this is like we're not even getting. This is what would be a Manus's worst hound, and he sounds fucking badass to me. Like, shit.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. Like, and yeah, I had the kind of the same thing. I was like, oh fuck, like, what are we getting into here?
And this very short section. I want to say this was like 3/4 of a page long. This section reveals, what Hairlock is doing is like super fucked up. Like he's caught the scent of hounds, and one has been sent to trail him. Hairlock is clearly fucking stupid or strategic, right? Like he seems to have kind of his own ambition that isn't what the bridge burners are looking for, but at the same time are. I don't know. I just get this weird, like really weird feeling about Hairlock.
Yeah, I think we're supposed to.
I get Chucky. Like every time I think of like Hairlock, I just think of like Chucky flying through like these portals. Just this.
I had not thought about it that way, and Chucky fucking terrifies me.
Oh, really?
Oh, I will not watch those movies.
Really?
No,
Not even now?
not do it. Nope, I won't do it.
Dude, we're gonna watch Chucky.
No, I'm not doing it.
You gotta watch the seed of Chucky.
No,
Yep.
not.
All right, man. Well, we'll move on to section 10 then. Fucking brutal, which explains why we couldn't really elaborate too much on on the previous section with these two guards, because it's purely just set up for this very small section where they get brutally fucking dismembered. Which takes us right into this last section here. Tattersale, unable to sleep, is laying on her back. Thoughts about her involvement with the bridge burners and her initial anger slip into her mind. She then feels a sense of excitement as well, thinking about the bridge burners and her involvement. So she's angry, but she also gets a sense of excitement from it. She's compelled to gather her possessions and open up her warren and travel from this and the Empire. But her hatred to see Taishren pulled down compels her to stay. She then hears the sound of a door opening and Hairlock emerges. Hairlock has this air of arrogance as he tells Tattersale that he's sorry to disappoint her because he's arrived back safely. He continues to downplay the hounds chasing him and comments on their need to sniff every tree. Tattersale then states that Quick Ben was disappointed by Hairlock's sloppiness. Hairlock seems to rage a bit at this and calls Quick Ben a fool, and that Hairlock gives Quick Ben the impression of power over him, even though he goes where he pleases. He wants to make his vengeance sweeter. Tattersale says to leave his vengeance for Taishren, as he still mocks Hairlock. Hairlock replies that Taishren will be the first to get his. And then screams are heard outside the compound. And Tattersale bolts upright. Hairlock says, "I've been found. I cannot be seen." Hairlock scurries to his box next to a wall and puts like a protection spell on it, and then tells Tattersale that she must kill the hound and that she has no other choice. Tattersale embraces her Thyr Warren, and all fatigue and exhaustion leave her. The door to her room bursts open. Her shield she made from her Warren deflects the shards of wood that were coming her way. A wave of the hound's power pours over her as she thinks about how it was so old, older than anything she's faced before. The hound appears in the doorway, sniffs, sets sight on the box at the wall. Tattersale says no, to which the hound slowly moves his head in her direction, noticing her for the first time. The hound charges at Tattersale. Quickly, she was able to put up wards or walls between her and the charge. It was enough to force her to fly backwards. Thankfully, the wards behind her broke her impact. The hound also recovered pretty quickly, pounces again at Tattersale with mouth open, teeth bared, but then a force of gray light strikes the hound, and the hound is flung into the bed next to Tattersale. Hairlock is standing on his box and admits that he is the one the hound seeks. Hairlock summons a chaotic warren that smells like somebody ripped major ass, and then soon she realizes what Hairlock is doing. She yells at the hound to get away because Hairlock is trying to steal the hound's soul. At this moment, Ganot's Paran opens the door from the bedroom and uncovers a sword from the blankets around him. He plunges the sword into the hound's chest. Hairlock screams no and rushes towards the hound. Tattersale swings out her leg and trips the puppet. The hound opens his warren and leaves. Tattersale, looks at Paran questioning, like, how the fuck did your sword penetrate the hound's magic? He looks down at his sword and says, just lucky. Hairlock curses at both of them and then threatens that both of them will pay. Tattersale kind of smirks and states that now that the Shadow Throne has something to think about, Hairlock will be too busy trying to stay alive. Hairlock states that he's returning to his box and that Taishren will eventually be here, and that Tattersale is to say nothing. She could feel herself kind of fading, to which she heard a man ask her what she heard. She simply said a coin spinning. Oh, this is such a great chapter. I loved this chapter.
Yeah, the end of it really ramped up the intensity a lot. I was not expecting a fight with the dog, and obviously we kind of went over it quick, but just like the detail, and it was a pretty good it wasn't an all out war scene, but a pretty good battle scene.
Yeah, it was very descriptive, which I liked because it gave a sense of like, I mean, Tattersale at this point, I feel like is probably a big player in this book. Uh, I very well could be wrong, but I think that readers at this point they have a connection with Tattersale. I would assume I like her. That most people reading this book don't hate her. Maybe some do. I don't know. So I was worried. I'm like, oh my god, is this dog gonna like eat the shit out of her, or what's happening here? But then at the same time, I was surprised at Hairlock as well, like coming out of nowhere and essentially saving her ass, right?
Yeah, it was pretty wild, all of it. Like I was not expecting, and then stabbing, like I didn't see that coming.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, right. Because all you hear, or not hear, but all you read is that Gano's busts open this door and is like unsheaths his sword and he shoves it into the hound. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you just don't see that shit coming. And I
No,
feel like that
but it was fun to read.
yes. I like those like little gifts, those little surprises. This brings me back to the sword. You remember how Opan were commenting on his sword?
Yep.
I feel like they did something to his sword that made it pierce the hound's magic.
Okay. Kind of gave him an edge.
Right. And even in the deck of cards section, right? Like it's described as the sword with this like black streaking something smoke pointed at the hound. So essentially the deck of dragons in the previous section predicted this scene.
Yeah, I think it did.
Because Opan is so the deck of cards, the Opan was the like they're the ones who are controlling the deck. Opan's luck, or I think they called it Opan's game. So that's what happened at the beginning of the chapter is Opan decided to intervene and allow Ganos to have or maybe they didn't do anything with the sword. Maybe it's just the fact that they intervened gave the sword special abilities. I don't know. But yeah, it was Opan who intervened, which then caused Ganos to be able to kill the hound. And Tattersale saw all of this in the deck of dragons.
Well, I guess, do we know that Gear is actually dead, or was he just wounded really bad? I guess that I don't really remember.
Oh yeah, he's not dead. Yeah, because he creates a warren and disappears. He's definitely
He's got to be hurting. He's a hurting unit.
yeah. So I'm assuming that there's probably going to be some type of uh, retaliation from Amanus, right? I mean, he's not going to take too kindly to one of his hounds being stabbed, which he's probably not suspecting, right? I mean, Tattersale says that this is like one of the oldest things. Older than what did I say? Older than the shadow realm itself. So
Yeah, pretty old.
yeah, so this is some ancient shit, man.
For sure.
But yeah, it's I don't know, it buttoned things up pretty nicely. I feel like I got a pretty good sense of things that have happened that have taken place.
It was a hell of the way to end the first quarter of this book.
First book, right? I forget what they're called. Like, yeah, book. They call it the book. So book 1 we just finished.
Oh,
And now we're moving on
yeah.
to book 2, which is Darujhistan. But
And we have 7 books. So
yes. Plus, well, a prologue and an epilogue and then 7 books, right?
Right.
So I guess what are your thoughts now that we've finished book one?
I can't wait to start the next part.
I mean book one of book one.
I know it was really good. I mean, I know people said this is a hard book series to read, and we kind of just got dropped into all this shit going on. Um, but so far, I haven't felt like it's been super complicated. Obviously, there's a lot that we don't know, but so far, I feel like you and I have been able to keep track of what's been going on.
Right, like you're satisfied, right? Like you're not too full, but you're not hungry. You're just
I'm pretty hungry for more.
I guess as far as like this meal.
Then yes, I am more than satisfied.
I also I mean, I know that just kind of goes back to what we already talked about, but the coin spinning is a reoccurring theme. So I've got a feeling that it's a representation of luck, right? Like, you flip a coin, it's spinning in the air, it either lands this way or that. So I feel like Tattersale hearing that is just maybe a confirmation that like things with Opon are still good. Yeah, I don't know how to interpret that, but what are your thoughts about the spinning coin?
We have heard that multiple times, and yeah, I'm not really sure what to make of it, but it's got to have some sort of significance.
I also was curious if like maybe it's like a representation of Ganoz's life. Like it's still spinning, like it's still moving, it's still going.
Could go either way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, what a ride, dude. What a journey. I still can't believe that this is our fifth episode. And now
It's been fun so
it
far.
has been fun. Some interesting shit. Some some good revelations like Whiskey Dick.
Yep.
Why that wasn't, unraveled earlier, I don't know. It eludes me.
Hey, but we got to it before the end of the book, so
That is true. We did. At the end of book one of book one.
any final thoughts on this?
No, I don't believe that I have anything. I feel like I feel satisfied. But as you
Any
as you
predictions?
predictions, ooh, well, I know that Whiskey Jack has that or had that premonition kind of in chapter two, excuse me, of when they learned of their mission to Darujhistan. So I definitely think that like something's gonna hit the fan. I think that Amanis and Cotillion and Sorry are going to unfold a little bit more. I also think that something with the gods is going to be revealed. Something with their game. What about you? What are your predictions?
I'm not even sure.
Not even sure. What are you not sure about?
I think things will probably get worse in Darujhistan.
What do you think? What do you
Um,
speculate?
I think we'll probably see some people die, some main characters. I guess I'm not really particularly sure on who yet, but I think we'll probably experience some loss.
I didn't even think of that possibility. What about new characters? You think we'll be introduced to some new characters or
I think we'll have to be.
yeah. I mean, I guess my I guess one takeaway is that I appreciate that there's not a ton of characters that you have to like keep track of, you know?
Right.
I guess in other novels that I've read, like there's so many damn characters that you're like, well, what is their significance? And they play a very small part. But I appreciate that, for example, with these guards, right? That there's no description of who or what they're wearing or their background or anything like that. They're just in your mind solitary guards that end up being a dog's chew toy.
They're just there,
They're just there, they exist, but nothing more than that.
expendable.
Right. Yeah, man. It's gonna be fun. I'm excited to read this next chapter.
Yeah, I don't know what we're gonna get off the bat here. Are we gonna see the same characters we know, or are we going to start off with somebody new? I'm not sure. I haven't even looked ahead. Haven't read anything off the next chapter to see anything, so we'll have to find out here.
Yeah, I mean, it's very possible that we get introduced to a whole new set of characters that maybe will converge with the ones we've already met. I mean, who fucking knows?
Yeah.
Well, cool, man. We've got our podcast published on Apple Podcasts. You can find us by searching for D&J's Epic Quest. We are also on Anchor and Spotify.
And you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Just search D&J's Epic Q or D&J's Epic Quest, something along those lines. You'll find us there. Join us and have a conversation.
Yes, please chime in. We would love to hear everybody's thoughts on the content you've listened to.
Definitely.
All right. Well, Derek, I guess I'll bid you adieu.
You have a good night, buddy. We'll talk again next week.
All right. Take care, man.
You too.